morning, ladies and gentlemen. Like Bhaskar, I too am a practicing manager and leader. So therefore, coming in an audience full of coaches and full of people who are extremely competent to go behind the mind and also to project the leadership into the future is really not my competence. I'm here largely because of two people. I must admit very honestly. One is because of Ram Ramanathan, and his wife Anita were like, they were the representations of civilization. When I was a young management trainee at Hindustan Lever, as it was called in the 80s, since we all had to do a 2-month stint in ETA, right? And those of you who have been to ETA will realize that it's a pretty interesting place to be in, where VUCA was long before discovered by all the dacoits that were there in that place. So every other weekend we were allowed to come back from our village, and I was in a village called Bajitpur, and I would come back, and Anita and Ram were like almost like parents, to take care of us youngsters who were completely lost in the wilderness. I don't know, probably he got his bug for the need for and leading for change from that experience, because that really transformed many of us as young professionals to look at India with very Indian eyes, because you've been through that experience. So my purpose here again is to share a personal view of leadership. This is not really to give you any sermon or treatise. I mean, with master coaches and people who've been so well accredited to the task of coaching. I just look at leadership as probably the simple dimension is that leadership is variable when change is the only constant. So that is really the challenge that we have, that change is constant. It is taking place in many ways. There are no good days and there are no bad days. There are only transformations that are taking place. No organization can hope and pray to be in the sunshine all the time, and neither can it be hoped to be in the storm all the time. And there are some companies like mine, which were in sunshine for a long time and then got into a terrible storm. And I think at that stage, no formula, no practice, no business contingency plan, as we call it in large companies, is going to work. The only thing that really works is leadership. And that is something, if I were to say, is probably at the core of the change process that we are in. When the fact is that demand for leadership is a lot more than what we are capable of supplying. Not because of technical talent, not because of incapacities or incapabilities of the great institutions to produce outstanding engineers and to produce outstanding technologists and IT specialists and human resource specialists and marketing specialists. But the fact is, leadership is all about, as was said by a famous conductor, leadership is like being a conductor, getting all the best musicians to play the music and to play their best music and still not make a sound. That is the characteristic of leadership that really works in the environment that we're talking about. And when I heard the Titan story from Bhaskar, I well now realize why Xerxes Desai is still being lauded many, many years after demitting office of the head of Titan, because of those seeds that had been planted in that organization so well. So if I were to look at what is the kind of basic framework that, for me, the basic framework of leadership comes from characteristics that are important to have in people. Exuding positivity. These are all very simple. I mean, whatever I'll be saying, ladies and gentlemen, does not merit even a byline in an article, right? Let alone any mention in any paper. But these are the fundamentals of what a leader is expected to do. Exuding positivity. Why is it so difficult for us to get up positive, stay positive in the most difficult of times? And if you're really into a crisis, then I'm afraid you have to be the most positive guy in the room. I know that it sounds a bit contradictory, but that is the reality of difficult times. Embracing the opportunity. There are good times, there are bad times, there are momentums, there are companies like Titan that talk from 15,000 crores to 52,000 crores. They talk about an opportunity out there in terms of the consumer space. There's also opportunities when you fall, right? As indeed, for my organization, we took a huge fall. One of our most iconic brands went through a death experience. Now, what do you do with a death experience is like what human beings do, right? You got a massive heart attack, you come down with a disease that is extremely debilitating and dangerous to you. You decide either to rise again, to come out of it, and to be a better human being and to spend the rest of your life doing something useful, or you decide to hope and pray that the Lord calls you early, and the Lord does. Sometimes the Lord also is very kind. He says, fine, the guy wants to go, let him go. So I think it's important of how leadership is capable of embracing opportunities. Engagement. Leadership task is primarily to engage. I'm not the best engineer, I'm not the best marketing person, I'm not the best sales guy, I'm not the best finance guy. A guy like me, as Pranav rightly said, I'm a master's in economics. I wanted to be a civil servant. I might have been in the IAS, I don't know. Hindustan Lever came and picked me up from an institution they never went to afterwards. So therefore you realize what a mistake they made, right? So they managed to take me. So I remember one of my early bosses once called me and he said, what are you? Are you a civilian or a military man? So I said, sir, I don't understand you. He said, you are a civilian if you are a non-MBA like me, but you are a military fellow if you have done an MBA. I said, sir, I'm a plain civilian, right? But I think over the years, one has learned and one has imbibed from various people, from various learned people, from various inspiring people across organizations to be capable of doing that principle of engagement. How do you get your leaders to engage? How do you get your leaders to involve themselves, not just temporally, but also emotionally? I think that is an important aspect of leadership. Communication. I think Bhaskar talked about it. Perfunctory communication without meaning is like a song without tune. There's no point, you're doing the task, but are you really rising the organization? Are you really raising the bar? Are you really inspiring people to do the things? That what Sun Tzu said in The Art of War, that a general could inspire a soldier to give up his life, and his mother wept. She said, when my son joins this general, he will give up his life. Because he does it lovingly, he does it out of a great passion for this person. I think those are things which become extremely important in leadership. Credibility and confidence doesn't come from degrees. Bhaskar Bhatt is from Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad. I'm from the Delhi School of Economics. Somebody else could be from some other institution. Institutions don't build credibility. It is deeds, it is purpose, it is values that build credibility over a period of time. How do you build this characteristic in leaders to be unwavering to the purpose and values that you hold? And invariably, purpose and values also come from the kind of family backgrounds and educations that you've been through. I had the privilege, and I'm eternally grateful to my parents for doing this, for going to one of the finest schools. I believe it is the finest school, called Rishi Valley. Right? I spent 6 years at Rishi Valley. I think my father spent half his salary to educate me there. But I think it has been the most transformative experience that has led me in good stead in all my life. I think it's important that these seeds are sown when they are sown and that they are built over a period of time. So credibility and confidence, again, is important. Facing reality. I think the fact of the matter is all of us, the longer our designation on that 3-inch visiting card becomes, the greater becomes the shroud of ego that envelopes us. We all want to be considered as superstars. We all want to be comparing ourselves to the mightiest and the brightest in the land. And there are people, right? I've always come across 3 kinds of people in my life. The first kind of people are the guys who come in, say nothing, do nothing, they eat the biscuits and drink the tea or coffee and walk away. The second kind of people are those who come and say, this is not possible, the naysayers. I love the naysayers because in a crisis, they are the ones that motivate the optimists like me to go out and say, it can happen and we will make a difference. And the third are the worst, they are the jingoists. Sir, without you, sir, you are the one, sir. The company has risen because of you, sir. You are the one, sir. You are the father of this company, sir. You are the mother of this company. As a middle-aged man, when you're getting thrashed at home by your wife for putting on a paunch, the best palliative is to come to the office and somebody to tell you that you're a superhuman being, right? But facing reality is ultimately about leadership. And that is that the buck stops at your desk. The garbage will be at your door. Now, you want to pass it on, that's a different point altogether, but the sting still remains. And I think that is the important tenor of leadership. And lastly, uniting the organization. It is extremely difficult to sometimes unite the organization to the same purpose, and especially when you're in difficult times, because we are taught to be analytic in our approach, right? We have decision trees and we have got, focal points of contact. Why did the problem happen? Root cause analysis. The worst thing to do in a crisis is to do root cause analysis. Because then everybody says, I'm not responsible, somebody else is responsible, right? And then you are still in that quagmire, you are still in that problem and not able to do a damn thing simply because you're not able to unite the organization. And whom do you have to blame? Your professors, because ultimately they have taught you that analytic approach. Fortunately, I never went to a B school. When I went for my Hindustan Lever interview, I didn't even know what a case study was. I asked somebody next to me, I said, what is a case study? She said, you mean you don't know a case study? I said, no, I know theorems and I know hypotheses, because that's what I've been taught at the Delhi school. I've never been taught case studies. Sometimes ignorance is bliss, because you then tend to face the situation as it is intuitively rather than using any set model. So if that's really what the essentials of leadership is, in whatever sense we define it, I call it my 5 forces. I think change is upon us. I think there's no two ways about it. Change is happening every day. There is a generational change, environmental change. There is changes in the business context, technology. Everything is changing very, very rapidly. The first thing is to comprehend this. I believe that many of you here are coaches, people who are going to be building or nurturing the future leaders for the country, or indeed people who are already in leadership positions who need to be nurtured. So how do you comprehend change? I think the models for that need to be answered. What do you deduce from change? What do I comprehend and what do I deduce from this? How do I communicate this? The important issue sometimes is that, we are all being trained and most of our leadership models are built up on achieving individual KPIs as we grow in the organization. And that's one of the tragedies of our performance appraisal system. You get measured by what you do. You never get measured by what a team does. Some organizations do it wisely, and they are the ones who probably will be having a longer life as organizations. Most of us rise because we achieve individual targets, individual goals. When you are in a leadership position, you therefore tend to superimpose your professional competence of a particular skill or a business in trying to influence either change or trying to communicate it with that vector. So if I'm a finance guy, I will give all the numbers part of it. If I'm a marketing guy, I'll give all the marketing part of it. But communicating change is more holistic. It is far more interweaving across different themes. And I think that itself is an important aspect of building leadership. And finally, action. How do you get people in the context of change to embrace action and to go ahead? Because that is, in fact, the challenge of leadership and challenge of this age. You're going to be constantly faced by a barrage of new arrows being fired at you. Your ability to identify the most important arrows, to be able to comprehend that, to be able to translate that into an action and to be able to communicate that becomes the essence of leadership. And I think this is the skill that sometimes we find. I mean, many times I go to the institutes of management, and I find they're extremely bright people. They're people with an enormous amount of strategic competence. Where they fall by the wayside is in simple acts of human behavior. Perceptions, communications, actions, behaviors. These are the things that seem to go wrong. And I don't know where, maybe in our education system, we have got this wrong. Around all this, of course, is the fact that there is an overall response mechanism that an organization needs to build up. But if you take leadership as being the fulcrum, then it is an important aspect that all that you do in terms of your response mechanisms will be critically enabled or disabled by the quality of leadership that you get. And I think that is therefore the reason why we should all be inspired to build this team for the future. If you take each of them, and if you look at coaching as really what you could intervene with, these are just a few suggestions from my own side, seeing the pace of leadership and how it happens. Building perspective. Many of our leaders have functional competence, business competence, but lack perspective. Reading a book for them is a waste of time. Netflix is better, right? I'm not saying this as a value judgment. I'm saying that to build perspectives, you have to read, you have to understand. As Bhaskar rightly said, you have to listen, right? And I think that capability is something that needs to be built into leaders, especially leaders who are going to take on important assignments in their careers. The comprehension framework, how do you comprehend this? Contextualize it in the context of the industry or the business or the organization that the person is. I think contextualization is a very, very important skill. And that is a skill that as coaches, you should be imparting and you can impart. If you look at the next one, deduction. What do you deduce from the amount of change that is taking place and how do you make that happen? Number one, pragmatism. I think pragmatism is not shooting from the hip. Pragmatism is to be grounded, is to be humble, is to be aspirational, to be inspirational, and yet know that if I am capable of climbing a hill, Mount Everest is some kilometers away. So I think it is that sense of pragmatism that a coach can give, which probably leadership and management teams can also provide. The sense of dissatisfaction that Bhaskar talked about is that sense of dissatisfaction that you can introduce through this mechanism. The macro mini bits, as I call it. You know, the tendency for many of us is to swallow and to be able to grasp the details, but to forget the woods. We keep looking at the trees because we are rewarded in organizations to either recognize the trees or to cut them. You are never recognized, you are never applauded, you are never rewarded, you are never feted for looking at the woods. Because then they say, yaar, ye to bada upar wala aadmi hai. Ye, top level kind of guy hai, he doesn't get into the nitty-gritties. And we pride ourselves as leaders to be micromanagers. Empowerment and enablement are only words in our dictionary, but anathema in practice. Because to empower is to give away power. To enable is to take away the self. So both of these are actions that are completely anathema to the central core of leadership, which is continuity at all costs. I want to be around as the head of this company for as long as it takes. I can drop dead, but still I will continue, right? So that is then the essential instrument that we work with. Formulation. How do you formulate this whole thing? How do you put it in a context? How do you make it graspable? How do you make it tangible? The reason why organizations move is for a very selfish purpose. Everyone sees something in what is being proposed. Nobody just does it simply because they just love the guy, he's a handsome fellow or a pretty woman. Nobody follows that. They follow it because I see what's in it for me. And I think that is an important element that you can help in getting leaders to practice. And then, of course, making choices. We are very good, and that's when, especially when you employ some top-notch consultants, they will come up with 50 different options, right? And then you'll be debating for the next 50 years, which is the best option to take. And by the time the scenario has changed, I think making choices and making decisions and the capacity and the capability to make decisions becomes so important in the context of leadership. So these become important elements in what I have seen in organizations nurturing great leaders. Bright people, capable of understanding, capable of formulating, and yet indecisive. Right? When it comes to the crunch, I cannot and I will not do it. Take the next one. Communication. And I think there's no art or science. You don't have to be like a Modi, or you don't have to be like some outstanding orator. You don't have to be Adolf Hitler, shattering pieces of glass to get people ecstatic around you. Communication is a simple heart-to-heart conversation. If I say from the heart, it reaches your heart. If it doesn't, then there is a problem. Content and clarity. Sometimes we are rewarded for being complicated. The scourge of the PPT, as I call it, in the start of my career, it was all about those lovely acetates. You wrote them. The only crisis that ever happened was that the bulb fused, right? That's about it. Nothing else ever happened. So you changed it and you dribbled with it and you did whatever you want to. You were forced to communicate. Today you got lovely PPTs, arrows flying across, things lighting up, images that take away the words, right? And in that situation, we are obfuscating content and clarity for gimmicks. And this becomes a part of the DNA of organizations. This is what we reward leadership for, and when leadership reaches the top, they are not able to stand in an audience and talk without anything that they need as a prop. Construction and logic. I think this is an area where, again, especially I would say this in very difficult times. In the times that I had the privilege of leading the organization during the Maggie saga, you didn't have the answers. You only had questions. The only task of leadership then was to give hope. The only thing I could give was hope. I didn't have the answers. I didn't know how big the fire was. I didn't know whether I'll be incinerated with it. The organization will burn down. A 105-year-old company in this country, whether it will shut shop and go. I never knew. You have to present reality and yet give hope. And this is a huge challenge, especially when you are being swamped. When an industry is being taken over, or when an industry is being redefined, you have to give people hope and yet give them the logic for change and yet tell them that, ladies and gentlemen, the water is boiling from underneath. And we had better be frogs that jump out, not get boiled with the water. I think this whole capability is something that will become even more important in the coming days, in the coming years. Emotive versus factual. One thing is, again, Bhaskar said this very well. One thing is all about the passion part of it. But the fact of the matter is that passion needs to go with facts, right? All bluster is not going to get you very much in terms of either buying, convictions, what's in it for me, or capabilities to act. And I think this whole blend of what leadership should be in which situations and how do you build that capability over a period of time is an important facet. Sometimes getting your leaders exposed to different experiences. Like I must say that in the last couple of years, I've started play reading, right? I enjoy reading plays. And I think it gives me a different dimension of how to get the character into an emotive role and yet be outside it. So these are perspectives that we need to build in our leaderships. What I'm saying is a lot of soft skills is where the rubber hits the road. It is no longer unfashionable to say that I don't have the emotive content for the job. I have the cranial content, but the emotive content is something that I need to build upon. Frequency and the audience. I think again the question is, in an organization going through transition, through change, how do you advise leadership on the frequency and the audience that you will have for communicating this change? So these are, again, important facets that need to be built into any exercise to identify leadership, to groom leadership, and to nurture leadership over a period of time. And finally, of course, evaluation and recalibration. How do you evaluate how that communication has gone? Clapping around and saying, great job done, is not it. I think great political leaders are able to read the messages from whatever they have said, get the feedback, and loop that into the change process of communication as it goes forward. How do you do that? What skills need to be done? And what capabilities do you need to have? Because you are in constant change. And the only variable, as I said, is your leadership. So if you are able to be up to it, it's fine. If not, then you seriously have a problem. The next one is, of course, action. What's important? I think defining what's important is critical. Your team can help you do it. An independent coach can help you do it. Persons outside, stakeholders can help you do it. And this is really, again, in good times and in bad times. Right? In good times, you need the skill. In bad times, you need it even more. What would I say? When would I say? What buttons would I press? What would I do when 25% of my business has gone up in smoke and the next 75% is also shaking? What do I need to prioritize? My people, my factories, my stakeholders? Who, when, what? What do I need to tell them? How do I need to act? How do I manage myself? Managing yourself is the biggest challenge of leadership. How do I control my emotions? I feel frustrated. I feel angry. I feel bad. This is not who I am. This is what you're telling me who I am. But the fact of the matter is, all that translates into the action that you speak of. Empower, enable versus paralyze. Leadership's biggest challenge and biggest training instrument has to be empowerment and enablement. The reason why a Titan is where it is today is because Bhaskar as a leader has empowered and enabled his people. Period. If that doesn't happen, that organization cannot be great. And what do we simply do? We tend to paralyze. Why? Because we are worried. We are worried about our own chairs and about our own consequences of leadership. So therefore, this empowerment, enablement bit, how it is translated and rewarded in organizations to leadership and how it is nurtured into leadership is important. And sometimes you see this happening in terms of real behaviors. I mean, I have a small story on this. 1985, I was posted as an animal feeds manager in a unit in Ahmedabad, right? It was one of our starting up jobs in the company in Hindustan Lever. And that was the time there were riots in Ahmedabad. There was the anti-reservation agitation taking place. I get a call from Bombay, from the assistant to the chairman of Hindustan Lever, Meher, who said that, look, Doc would like to visit you. So I was petrified. I said, my God, this is the worst thing to happen. I'm just confirmed management training and this chairman is going to turn up and he's a difficult man, tough man, etc., etc. Dr. G comes to the factory and those days you had only acetates. I mean, you didn't have PPTs. So I prepared most acetate deck and made it over God knows how many days. And he said, so what do you have to say? So I looked at him, I said, sir, I've got a deck for you and I would like to present this to you. He said, who came for your presentation? I said, I thought you came for listening to my business. I mean, what else would you be here? He said, young man, I'm here to just tell you that there is somebody behind you, the organization and the chairman of the company. I'm fully confident of what you will do or you will not do, but I want to tell you that this organization is behind you and that I, as the chairman of this company, am behind you in this difficult moment. If you have any problems, if you have any issues, shoot, I'm here to solve it. It has led 33 years later, it still rings in my head. And when I look at a young trainee walking in through the door, I want to ask him the same questions. Because demonstration is the best form of building this leadership model. So therefore, that's why some companies build that leadership and build that paradigm. Calibrate, synchronize, sequence. I think these again are arts and not sciences, but you have to get this across to people at all points in time. On-the-go feedback techniques. Sometimes, leadership is so used to listening to great things that you miss those little nuances, but you could have, is forgotten, right? And I think this on-the-go feedback techniques is a very important way. I mean, I do it. I walk around the office every day. I mean, I don't do a day's work. I walk around half the time. And one of the ways in that is to sit with a youngster and ask him, how are things going? Are you feeling empowered? Is things happening in this company? You're a millennial. You're 23 years old. Do you want to be in this company like me at 58? Or do you want to quit? Right? What will make you stay? So these are ways, and the guy will come back. I mean, these days, the great thing about millennials is that they tell you exactly on your face. I love it. In my time, we were very polite. You had to be stiffened and not say, because you were worried. There were not too many other jobs apart from Hindustan Lever or Nestle or any of these guys. And finally, how are we doing? Or how were we doing? I think these are again important issues in leadership. Many times it is about being at a place transiting and knowing that you have to enjoy the journey rather than just keep worrying about the destination. I think it is that leadership journey that is the most effective and that's the most fruitful, where you enjoy the journey rather than keep worrying, am I going to knock at some door or am I going to knock at some milestone? And responses, I think again, these are fairly clear. Measurement, how do you measure the response mechanisms that you have? Real versus anecdotal, I think there is a lot of room in companies for storytelling. We have stopped storytelling because we believe that stopped with our grandmothers. But the fact is, I think we have learned a hell of a lot coming out of our own journeys, which we can share. Snapshot versus sustainable, is the response a snapshot or is it something that is sustainable over a period of time? And what actions need change? I think these are again areas where we need a lot of nurturing and coaching with leadership. And are you willing for it? Are you willing to listen to what is being said? Sometimes that itself can be quite traumatic for most people. And finally, coping with failures. The biggest tragedy of leadership is to not be able to cope with failures. And many of us are on the success model. We are successful simply because we have done things right. And many times we have done things right because we have never chosen another path. And in today's context, I think risk is center to the game that we are in. Everything is a risk. When I plan to make my company from 10,000 to 20,000 crores, when Bhaskar looks at 15,000 to 52,000 crores, everything is fraught with risk. The capability of the leader to stomach risk, to understand risk, to comprehend risk, to communicate risk, to empower and enable risk is going to be as important as the risk itself. And sometimes we are not able to read that. So what would I say in summary? Number one, change will swamp you if leadership eludes you. Leadership is the centerpiece of what we are. Today, we are short of leaders across the broad spectrum. Industry, politics, economics, institutions, wherever, we don't have them. And not that we don't have bright, brilliant people. Oxford and Cambridge and Stanford and Harvard and Yale and Columbia and all these universities are still producing all those PhDs. But we are not getting leaders. That is the tragedy. Second, there is no magic mantra. There is no magic mantra, right? It's like a crisis. As what Leo Tolstoy once said, happy families are alike, unhappy families are unhappy in their own way. That's the tragedy of where we are. Coaching is therefore contextual. To be a leader is to be human. I think many times we forget this. We want to put on this mukhota of being serious, absolutely focused sharks in the swimming pool. Unfortunately, or fortunately, your people want you to be human. To be vulnerable is a sign that your ego is dropping. To be humble is actually a great sign of access. The Dalai Lama once said, when you speak, you repeat what you know. When you hear something new. And I think that is a characteristic that we don't have as leaders very often. एक ही भूल करता रहा, धूल चेहरे पे थी और आईना साफ करता रहा. This is the tragedy of most of us. We keep cleaning the aina when the dhul is on our face, right? We don't make the changes that we need to, but when there is no need for a change, why? Because somebody feels like it. There's an itch. It's like the marketing brand, the brand management changes that happen. And last but not the least, hearing from a practitioner like me is only half the story. So I thank you all very much for your patient listening. I thank Ram, I thank Harish for inviting me here. Thank you very much. Thank you.